The alarm on the HMS Endeavour rang loud and sharp through the quiet bridge. Captain Jake Morrison looked up from his coffee and frowned. They were 3 weeks into a routine survey mission at the edge of known space. Nothing ever happened out. "Here, what is it, Chen?" Jake asked his communications officer. Lieutenant Bobby Chen turned around in his chair, his face puzzled. "Sir, we're getting a transmission. It's weak and broken up, but it's definitely a distress call." Jake set down his coffee and walked over to the communications station. "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through, speaking broken Galactic standard. The voice was soft and musical but filled with desperation. "Please, anyone. My people are dying. Our world is ending. We have asked everyone, no one will help us, please." The transmission cut to static again, then came back stronger. "My name is Kira of the Vallani people. Our sun is dying. Our oceans are disappearing. We sent messages to all the great powers of the galaxy. The Centauri Republic, the Altarian Empire, the Silicon Collective, they all said no. We have nothing to trade. Nothing valuable. We are just dying." Jake felt his stomach twist. He had heard of the Vallani before. They were an aquatic species from somewhere in the outer rim. Peaceful people who lived in coral cities beneath the waves of their ocean world. "Please." Kira's voice continued, now barely more than a whisper. "We are not asking for wealth or weapons, we just want to live. Somewhere. Anywhere. We will work. We will serve. We just want our children to see tomorrow." The transmission ended with a burst of static. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Jake looked around at his crew. They all had the same expression on their faces: shock, sadness, anger. "Sir," said Lieutenant Susan Drake from the navigation station. "I can trace the signal. It came from the tidal prime system. That's about 6 days from here at maximum speed." Jake nodded slowly. "Bobby, send a message back. Tell them we received their transmission. Tell them we're coming." "Sir?" Bobby looked confused. "We don't have authority to make contact with new species. We need approval from Earth Command first. Then get me Admiral Hayes on the long-range communicator. Priority 1. An hour later, Jake sat in his ready room staring at the holographic image of Admiral Lisa Hayes. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had been in the space service for 30 years. Her face was serious as she listened to Jake's report. "Let me understand this, Captain," she said when he finished. "This alien species sent distress calls to every major power in the galaxy, and they all refused to help." "That's right, Admiral. According to their message, none of the big civilizations think they're worth saving. They don't have anything valuable to trade." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment. "And you want to go help them?" "Yes, ma'am. I think we should at least investigate, find out how bad things really are. Captain Morrison, Earth's colonies are still young. We don't have unlimited resources. We can't save every species in trouble." Jake leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, this isn't about resources. This is about who we are as a people. If we can help and we don't, what does that say about humanity?" The Admiral sighed. "I'll need to discuss this with the civilian government. In the meantime, you're authorized to make contact and assess the situation. But Morrison, don't make any promises we can't keep." 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge as the HMS Endeavour dropped out of hyperspace near Tidal Prime. What he saw made his heart sink. The planet below was a dying world. Once it had been covered by vast blue oceans with small continents scattered like islands. Now those oceans were brown and shallow. Massive storms raged across the surface. The planet's sun, an ancient red giant, flickered and pulsed with unstable energy. "Sir," said Lieutenant Drake, "I'm reading massive environmental damage down there. The ocean levels have dropped by 60% in the last 10 years. The atmosphere is becoming toxic from solar radiation." "Life signs?" Jake asked. "Still scanning." "Sir, I'm reading approximately 2.5 million Vallani life forms. They're concentrated in underwater cities near the deepest parts of the remaining oceans." Jake felt sick. 2.5 million people waiting to die while the galaxy ignored them. Bobby, open a channel to the surface. A few minutes later, the main screen showed the face of a Vellani. Jake had never seen one before. She looked almost human, but with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Gills fluttered on the sides of her neck. She was young, maybe in her 20s by human standards. "I am Kira," she said, her voice filled with amazement. You came. I cannot believe it. No one else would even answer our calls." "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Endeavor," Jake said. "We got your message. We're here to help." Kira's eyes filled with tears. "Help? But we have nothing to give you. No rare metals. No advanced technology. We are just farmers and artists and teachers. We grow coral and sing songs and raise our children. What could humans possibly want from us?" Jake felt his throat tighten. "We don't want anything from you. We just want to help because it's the right thing to do." Kira stared at him for a long moment. "I do not understand." The Centauri ambassador laughed at us. He said we were economically inefficient. The Altarians said helping us would set a bad precedent. The Silicon Collective calculated that our survival had no value to galactic commerce. "Well, they're wrong," Jake said firmly. "Every life has value. Every species deserves a chance to survive." For the first time, Kira smiled. It was a beautiful, hopeful expression. Perhaps there is still good in this galaxy after all. Over the next few hours, Jake learned the full scope of the disaster. Tidal Prime's sun was entering its final death throes. Solar flares were becoming more frequent and more powerful. The planet's magnetic field was weakening, allowing deadly radiation to reach the surface. The oceans were boiling away into space. The Vellani had maybe 6 months before their world became completely uninhabitable. "Captain," said Dr. Nancy White, the Endeavor's science officer, "I've been analyzing the Vellani physiology. They need very specific conditions to survive. High humidity, specific water chemistry, particular atmospheric pressure. Finding a suitable world for them won't be easy." Jake nodded grimly. This was going to be much harder than he had hoped. That evening, Jake sat alone in his quarters composing a message to Earth. He tried to find the right words to explain what humanity was facing. How could he make the politicians and bureaucrats understand what he had seen? How could he convince them that helping the Vellani was worth the enormous cost? He thought about Kira's face when she realized that someone had finally answered her. People's call for help. He thought about the 2.5 million Vellani waiting to die while the galaxy ignored them. Jake began to type. "Admiral Hayes, I am requesting immediate authorization for a full-scale humanitarian mission. The situation here is worse than we imagined. The Vellani people have approximately 6 months before their world becomes uninhabitable. They are facing complete extinction, and we may be their only hope for survival. I understand the costs involved. I understand that Earth's resources are limited. But Admiral, if we don't help them, no one will. Every other major power in the galaxy has already said no. The Vellani will die, and the galaxy will just move on like they never existed. I know what I'm asking for. Ships, supplies, personnel, time, money, all resources that Earth needs for its own expansion. But I also know what we're fighting for. Not territory or profit or strategic advantage. We're fighting for the idea that when someone is drowning, you throw them a rope, even if they can't pay you back. Especially if they can't pay you back. The Vellani have nothing to offer us except their gratitude and their lives. But maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what makes us human. Respectfully requesting immediate response. Time is running out." Jake sent the message and sat back in his chair. Now all he could do was wait and hope that humanity would choose to be better than the rest of the galaxy. The message from Earth took 2 days to arrive. Captain Jake Morrison paced nervously in his ready room as Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on his communication screen. Her face was tired, and Jake could see the weight of difficult decisions in her eyes. "Captain Morrison," she began, "I've spent the last 48 hours in meetings with the President, the Colonial Council, and half the government. The debate was intense. Jake held his breath. Many officials argued that we can't afford this mission. Our colonies need those ships and supplies. Some said we should let the Volani find their own solution. Admiral Hayes paused. But President Karen Williams made the final decision. She said that if humanity is going to be part of this galaxy, we need to show what we stand for. Jake felt his heart jump. Ma'am? You have authorization for Operation Lifeline. We're sending everything we can spare. Ships, supplies, medical teams, engineers, the works. Dr. Sam Rodriguez is leading the science team. Commander Alex Turner will handle fleet operations. Jake couldn't speak for a moment. Admiral, thank you. This means everything. Don't thank me yet, Captain. The real work is just beginning. And Morrison, the whole galaxy is watching. If we fail, it won't just be the Volani who suffer. It'll be a black mark on humanity for generations. Over the next week, Jake watched in amazement as Earth mobilized for the largest humanitarian mission in human history. Ships began arriving in the tidal prime system from every human colony. Military vessels, cargo haulers, medical ships, and even converted passenger liners. Commander Alex Turner arrived aboard the heavy cruiser UES Liberty. He was a tall, serious man who had commanded relief operations during the Mars dust storms. His job was to coordinate the massive fleet and keep everyone organized. Captain Morrison, Turner said during their first meeting, I've never seen anything like this. We have 73 ships so far, with more coming every day. Half of them are civilian volunteers. Jake looked out at the growing fleet through the Liberty's observation deck. Volunteers, private cargo companies, passenger ship operators, even some rich families who donated their personal yachts. When word got out about the mission, people just started showing up. They want to help. Dr. Sam Rodriguez arrived 2 days later with a team of xenobiologists and terraforming experts. She was a small, energetic woman who had spent years studying alien life forms. Her first priority was figuring out exactly what the Volani needed to survive. Captain, she told Jake after her initial studies, this is more complicated than we thought. The Volani aren't just aquatic. They need water with very specific mineral content. The pH has to be exactly right, the temperature range is narrow, and they require a particular type of atmospheric pressure. How particular? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. There are maybe 20 worlds in known space that could support them naturally, and most of those are already claimed by other species. Jake felt his stomach drop. So what do? We create artificial habitats, portable life support systems that can maintain Volani living conditions anywhere. It's never been done on this scale before, but it's our only option. Dr. Rodriguez and her team worked around the clock with engineer Paul Jackson, a brilliant young man who specialized in life support systems. They had to design habitats that could keep thousands of Volani alive during what might be a very long journey to find them a new home. The biggest problem, Paul explained to Jake, is power. These habitat systems need enormous amounts of energy to maintain the right conditions. We're talking about artificial oceans, atmospheric processors, water, purification systems, the works. Can we do it? Paul wiped sweat from his forehead. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Maybe, if everything goes perfectly, if we can find enough power sources, if the systems don't break down, if we can find a suitable world quickly. He paused. There are a lot of ifs, Captain. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued to grow. Ships arrived from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter mining stations, and even the distant Proxima Centauri colony. Each ship brought supplies, equipment, and volunteers. Jake met some of these volunteers and was amazed by their dedication. There was Maria Santos, a cargo ship captain who had mortgaged her ship to buy medical supplies. There was Dr. Tim Brooks, a retired physician who came out of retirement to help. There was engineer Lucy Park, who left her comfortable job on Luna to join the mission. Why? Jake asked Lucy during one of their planning meetings. You could have stayed home, kept your job, lived a safe life, Lucy shrugged. Captain, when I heard about those Volani children who might die just because their sun is burning out, I couldn't sleep. My daughter is 8 years old. If Earth was dying and we needed help, I'd want someone to care about her. Not everyone supported the mission, though. Jake intercepted several communications from other galactic powers, and what he heard made him angry. The Centauri ambassador had made a public statement calling humanity's rescue attempt naive and economically wasteful. The Altarian trade minister had laughed during a news interview, saying that humans would learn harsh lessons about galactic realities. The Silicon Collective released an official calculation showing that the resources humanity was spending on the Villani could have been used to establish 3 new colonies. They called the mission inefficient use of assets. Let them talk, President Williams said during a video conference with the fleet commanders. History will judge who was right. But the criticism hurt. Jake could see it in his crew's faces. They were risking everything for people they had never met, while the rest of the galaxy mocked them for it. The breakthrough came when Paul Jackson finished the first prototype habitat system. It was a huge cylindrical module that could house 500 Villani. Inside, it recreated the conditions of their underwater cities, the right water chemistry, the proper pressure, even artificial coral gardens. "It's beautiful," Kira said when Jake showed her the video feed from the test habitat. "It looks like home." But there was a problem. The habitat systems used an enormous amount of power. Each module needed its own fusion reactor to keep running. And fusion reactors were expensive and took months to build. "We need 60 modules to save everyone," Paul told Jake. "That means 60 fusion reactors. We have 12. Jake stared at the numbers. They could save about 10,000 Villani with the power sources they had. But there were 2.5 million people on the dying planet below. The solution came from an unexpected source. Chief Engineer Betty Walsh of the cargo ship Morning Star made a suggestion that changed everything. "What if we stripped the life support systems from some of our ships?" she asked during a fleet meeting. "Not completely, just reduce them to minimum necessary levels. We can use the extra power to run more habitat modules." Commander Turner looked horrified. "That would mean cramming our people into smaller spaces, with recycled air and water. It would be uncomfortable and potentially dangerous, but it would save lives," Betty said simply. Jake looked around the room at the other ship captains. "What do you all think?" One by one they agreed. Captain Santos was first. "My ship can handle it. My crew will understand." Captain Robert Stone, of the passenger liner New Hope, nodded. "We came here to save people. If that means being uncomfortable for a while, so be it." Dr. Rodriguez ran the calculations. If they reduced human life support to absolute minimums and transferred the saved power to Villani habitat systems, they could save about 50,000 more Villani. It still wasn't enough, but it was something. The work began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside Villani technical experts to modify ships and build habitat modules. The Villani were amazed by human determination and creativity, while the humans learned to appreciate Villani knowledge of biological systems and environmental balance. Kira worked as a translator and liaison between the species. Jake often saw her moving between human and Villani work teams, helping them understand each other. "Your people are remarkable," she told Jake one evening. "We have watched the galaxy for centuries. We have seen wars, trade disputes, territorial conflicts, but we have never seen anything like this. Strangers risking everything to help strangers." Jake was tired. He had been working 18-hour days for weeks. "We're not doing anything special, Kira. We're just doing what anyone should do." Kira smiled sadly. "Captain Morrison, if that were true, we would not be dying alone while the galaxy watches." As the fleet prepared for the massive evacuation effort, bad news arrived from the planet's surface. Tidal Prime's sun had begun releasing more powerful solar flares. The timeline had shortened. They now had maybe 4 months before the planet became completely uninhabitable, and they still didn't know where they would take the Villani refugees once they rescued them. Jake stood on the bridge of the HMS Endeavour, looking out at the fleet of ships that now filled space around the dying world. 79 vessels from across human space, all gathered for one purpose: to save people they had never met because it was the right thing to do. "Sir," Lieutenant Bobby Chen said from his communications station, "we're receiving a message from the Centauri Republic." "Put it through." The face that appeared on screen was Ambassador Marcus Vale, the Centauri official who had publicly mocked humanity's mission. His expression was smug and satisfied. The evacuation of Tidal Prime began at dawn on what the Villani called Final Day. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the HMS Endeavour, watching as dozens of human ships descended through the planet's poisoned atmosphere toward the underwater cities below. The conditions were worse than anyone had expected. Tidal Prime's dying sun flickered like a broken light bulb, sending waves of deadly radiation across the planet's surface. The storms that raged across the shallow seas were so violent that several smaller ships had to turn back. "Captain, Lieutenant," Susan Drake called from her station, "I'm reading massive atmospheric disturbances. The solar flares are increasing in frequency." Jake nodded grimly. They were running out of time even faster than predicted. Commander Alex Turner's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the UES Liberty. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. Priority goes to children, elderly, and sick. Medical teams to the surface now." Captain Lisa Grant led the first wave of rescue ships down to the largest Villani city, a place called Coral Heart. It had once been home to over 300,000 Villani, but now only about 50,000 remained alive in the deepest parts of the city where the radiation couldn't reach them. The sight that greeted the human rescue teams was heartbreaking. The beautiful coral buildings that Kira had described were cracked and dying. The water that had once been crystal clear was now murky and toxic. Villani families huddled together in the few remaining safe areas, waiting for death. Elder Zeph, the leader of Coral Heart, met Captain Grant at the city's main entrance. He was an old Villani with silver skin and wise, sad eyes. When he saw the humans in their protective suits carrying medical equipment and portable habitat modules, he began to cry. "I cannot believe you came," he said in broken Galactic standard. "After so many said no, I thought we would die forgotten." "No one gets forgotten on our watch," Captain Grant replied firmly. "Let's get your people out of here." The evacuation process was more difficult than anyone had imagined. The Villani habitat modules worked perfectly, but moving thousands of sick and frightened refugees from their dying cities to the ships in orbit was a massive challenge. Dr. Sam Rodriguez set up medical stations throughout the city to treat Villani suffering from radiation poisoning. Many of them were too sick to survive the journey to the ships without immediate treatment. "We need to work faster," she told her team of human and Villani doctors. "The radiation levels are increasing by the hour." Dr. Rodriguez and her people worked without rest, treating patient after patient. The human medics had never dealt with Villani physiology before, but they learned quickly. Medici. Tony Clark spent 16 straight hours helping Villani children, who were too weak to swim to the transport pods. "These kids are tough," Tony told Dr. Rodriguez during a brief break. "Tougher than they should have to be." "They've been living with disaster for years," she replied. "It's amazing any of them survived this long. But the humans were paying a price too. The protective suits they wore could only block so much radiation." Several crew members began showing signs of exposure sickness. Tony Clark collapsed during his 17th hour of work and had to be carried back to the ship for treatment. Engineer Paul Jackson worked around the clock to keep the habitat modules running as they filled with refugees. Each module could hold 500 Villani, and they had 43 modules spread across the fleet. But that still wasn't enough space for everyone. "We're at capacity," Paul told Jake over the radio. "The modules can't hold any more people without risking system failures." Jake looked at the numbers on his screen. They had rescued about 21,000 Villani so far, but there were still over 2 million people left on the planet. The solution came from an unexpected source. Captain Maria Santos of the cargo ship Rising Sun made a desperate suggestion. "What if we convert our cargo holds into temporary living spaces?" she asked during an emergency fleet meeting. "They won't be as comfortable as the habitat modules, but they'll keep people alive. The cargo holds don't have proper life support for Villani," Commander Turner pointed out. "Then we share ours," Captain Santos said simply. "We reduce human life support to emergency levels and reroute everything else to the refugees." Other captains began volunteering their cargo space immediately. Captain Robert Stone of the passenger liner New Hope was first. My ship can take 10,000 in the cargo areas if we strip out everything non-essential. That means your passengers will be breathing recycled air and drinking processed water, Turner warned. They'll understand, Stone replied. We didn't come here for a pleasure cruise. Jake felt a surge of pride in humanity. These people were willing to risk their own comfort and safety for strangers they had never met. The evacuation continued for 6 more days. Human crews worked in shifts around the clock, ferrying refugees from the dying cities to the ships above. The Villani helped however they could, with their natural swimming abilities making them excellent guides through the flooded ruins of their world. Kira worked as a coordinator between the human rescuers and the Villani refugees. Jake often saw her swimming between rescue sites, translating and helping organize the evacuation efforts. How many more cities? Jake asked her during one of his visits to the surface. 15 major settlements left, Kira replied, her voice tired but determined. Maybe 800,000 people total. Jake did the math in his head. At their current rate, they could save maybe half of them before the planet became uninhabitable. Then disaster struck. On the 7th day of the evacuation, Tidal Prime's sun released the largest solar flare in recorded history. The wave of radiation hit the planet like a hammer, instantly making the surface completely uninhabitable. All ships emergency ascent now, Commander Turner shouted over the fleet communication system. The radiation spike will kill anyone on the surface in minutes. Ships that were still loading refugees had to make terrible choices. Some captains waited until the last possible second, cramming as many Villani as they could into their vessels before fleeing to safety. Others had to leave with half-empty ships to save their crews from certain death. Captain Grant's ship, the UES Mercy, was caught in the middle of evacuating a city called Deep Current when the flare hit. She had to choose between saving her crew and waiting for 300 more Villani children who were swimming toward their rescue ship. She waited. The radiation hit the Mercy as the last Villani child was pulled aboard. Captain Grant and 12 of her crew suffered severe radiation exposure, but they saved every single refugee in that city. Navigator Beth Collins was working on the science vessel UES Discovery when the crisis hit. She had been calculating hyperspace, jump coordinates for the fleet's escape from the system. When the massive solar flare struck, she realized they had only minutes before the radiation would make hyperspace jumps impossible. We have to jump now, she told Captain Eric Hayes of the Discovery. If we wait any longer, we'll be trapped here when the sun goes supernova. But there was a problem. The jump she was proposing had never been attempted before. Jumping to hyperspace from inside a star system during a solar flare was considered impossible by most navigators. The gravitational distortions and radiation interference could destroy every ship in the fleet. Are you sure about this? Captain Hayes asked. Beth looked at her calculations one more time. No, sir, but it's our only chance. Jake, listening from the Endeavor, had to make the decision for the entire fleet. Stay and try to save more Villani but risk everyone's lives, or jump now and accept that they couldn't save them all. He thought about the 2.5 million Villani still on the planet. Below, he thought about the hundreds of thousands of refugees already aboard the human ships. He thought about his crew, who had risked everything for strangers. All ships, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump, Jake announced. Beth, transmit your coordinates to the entire fleet. Sir, Beth replied, her voice shaking slightly. I need to warn you. I've never done a jump like this before. Some ships might not make it through. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Beth, how many ships do you think we'll lose? Maybe 3. Or 4, sir. Possibly more. Jake opened his eyes and looked at his crew. They all nodded at him. They understood. All ships execute jump in 60 seconds, Jake announced. The hyperspace jump was the most terrifying minute of Jake's life. Reality seemed to twist around them as the fleet entered hyperspace, while solar radiation pounded their shields. Jake watched his instruments, waiting to see which ships would make it through. The UES Morning Glory, a small cargo vessel, disappeared in a flash of light. The passenger ship New Dawn vanished without a trace. The medical ship Healing Hand made it halfway through the jump before its engines failed and it was lost. When the fleet finally emerged from hyperspace 3 days later, Jake counted the ships around him. They had lost 4 vessels and their entire crews. Good people who had volunteered to help save strangers and paid the ultimate price. But they had saved over 400,000 Villani refugees. Not all of them, not even half, but 400,000 people who would have died if humanity hadn't answered their call for help. Elder Zeph, now aboard the HMS Endeavour, found Jake in his ready room that evening. The old Villani was crying as he spoke. The refugee fleet drifted through empty space for 3 weeks while the search teams looked for a new home for the Villani. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the converted cargo holds of the HMS Endeavour, watching Villani families huddled together in the makeshift living areas. The conditions were hard. The air was thin and recycled. The water tasted of metal from the ship's processors. Space was so limited that families had to sleep in shifts. But the Villani never complained. They were alive, and that was more than they had dared hope for weeks ago. Elder Zeph had become the unofficial leader of all the Villani refugees. He moved between the ships in the fleet, keeping morale up and helping resolve disputes. Jake often found him telling stories to Villani children, keeping their culture alive even in the cramped cargo holds. "How are they holding up?" Jake asked Dr. Sam Rodriguez during one of their daily medical briefings. "Better than expected," she replied, looking tired. "We've had some cases of stress sickness and a few injuries from the crowded conditions, but no major medical emergencies. These people are remarkably resilient. The search for a suitable world was proving more difficult than anyone had hoped." Explorer Matt Lee led a team of 3 scout ships, jumping from system to system looking for planets that could support Villani life. "Captain Morrison," Matt reported during one of his daily check-ins, "we've surveyed 47 worlds so far. Most are too hot or too cold. The ones with water don't have the right mineral content. The ones with good water don't have suitable atmospheric pressure." Jake rubbed his forehead. The habitat modules were working, but they weren't designed for permanent use. The fusion reactors that powered them needed maintenance and fuel. If they didn't find a world soon, they would have to start rationing power. "Keep searching, Matt. There has to be something out there." The breakthrough came on the 23rd day. Matt's voice crackled with excitement over the long-range communicator. "Captain Morrison, I think we found it. System designation NGC-2847. There's a world here with vast shallow seas, good atmospheric composition, and the right mineral content in the water. The locals are calling it New Coral." Jake felt his heart jump. "That sounds perfect. What's the problem?" There was a pause. "It's claimed, sir. The Silicon Collective has full territorial rights to the system." Jake's stomach sank. The Silicon Collective was one of the major galactic powers, a group of artificial intelligences that controlled hundreds of star systems. They were known for being cold, logical, and interested only in profit. "Have you made contact with them?" "Yes, sir. They're willing to negotiate." 2 days later, Jake sat in a conference room aboard the UES Liberty with Commander Alex Turner and Elder Zeph. On the main screen was Ambassador Unit 7742 of the Silicon Collective, a humanoid robot with glowing blue eyes and a metallic voice. "Captain Morrison," the ambassador said, "we have reviewed your request for colonization rights to the world you call New Coral. Our analysis indicates this world has significant value for mineral extraction and energy production." "We understand that," Jake replied carefully. "We're prepared to offer compensation for the rights to settle there." "Your compensation offers are insufficient," the ambassador stated flatly. "However, we are prepared to make an alternative arrangement." Jake didn't like the sound of that. "What kind of arrangement?" "The Silicon Collective will grant humanity colonization rights to New Coral in exchange for a service contract. All human colonies will provide labor for our mining operations throughout this sector. Duration, 500 years. The room went silent. Elder Zeph looked confused, but Jake and Turner understood immediately. The Silicon Collective was offering to make humanity their slaves in exchange for letting the Villani have a home. "That's unacceptable," Turner said firmly. Ambassador 7742's glowing eyes focused on him. "Then you have no agreement. The world remains Silicon Collective territory." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "Ambassador, there are 400,000 refugees in our fleet. They're dying. All they want is a place to live. Their survival is not a factor in our calculations, the ambassador replied. We deal in resources and services, not sentiment. The negotiation went on for hours, but the Silicon Collective wouldn't budge. They wanted 5 centuries of human labor in exchange for one world. It was a price that no sane leader would pay. After the meeting, Jake sat alone in his quarters trying to think of alternatives. They could keep searching for another world. But the refugees were getting weaker every day. They could try to negotiate with another major power, but the other species had already refused to help. The answer came from an unexpected source. Engineer Paul Jackson requested a private meeting with Jake and presented an idea that was both brilliant and crazy. Captain, what if we don't ask permission? Jake looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? New Coral is a big world mostly, water with scattered islands. The Silicon Collective has mining operations on maybe 10% of the landmass. What if we just settle on the other 90%? Paul, that would be an illegal colonization. It could start a war. Could it? The Silicon Collective are machines. They think in terms of profit and efficiency. If we settle in areas they're not using, and if we don't interfere with their operations, it might not be worth the cost of removing us. Commander Turner frowned. That's a huge gamble, Paul. If we're wrong, they could attack the refugee fleet. Paul leaned forward. Commander, with respect, the refugees are dying anyway. At least this gives them a chance. Jake thought about it for 3 days. He consulted with his senior officers, talked to the other ship captains, and even asked Elder Zeph for his opinion. Captain Morrison, the old Villani said, my people have been dying for months. If there is a chance to save them, even a small chance, we should take it. The decision was made. The human fleet would establish an unauthorized colony on New Coral. The landing began a week later. Captain Lisa Grant, now recovered from her radiation exposure, led the first wave of colony ships to the planet's surface. They chose a cluster of tropical islands far from the Silicon Collective's mining operations. The islands were beautiful. Clear blue water stretched to the horizon. Coral reefs teemed with alien sea life. The beaches were white sand and the forests were filled with strange but harmless creatures. It's like paradise, Kira said as she stepped onto the beach for the first time in months. She knelt down and scooped up a handful of seawater, testing it with her gills. The water is perfect, better than home. Engineer Paul Jackson worked with Villani biotechnicians to establish the first settlements. They built floating cities connected by bridges made of cultivated coral. The Villani, it turned out, were natural terraformers. They could grow living structures from coral and kelp, creating homes that were both beautiful and functional. The humans contributed their construction technology and engineering expertise. Together, the two species created something neither could have built alone. Dr. Rodriguez set up medical centers in the new settlements. The Villani refugees, breathing clean air and drinking pure water for the first time in months, began to recover quickly. Children who had been weak and sick started playing in the shallow lagoons. Adults began talking about the future instead of just surviving another day. But they all knew this peace might not last. 3 months after the colonization began, the Silicon Collective finally noticed what humanity had done. Ambassador Unit 7742 appeared on Jake's communication screen, and its glowing eyes seemed brighter than before. Captain Morrison, you have established an illegal colony on Silicon Collective territory. This is a violation of galactic law. Jake tried to stay. Calm, Ambassador, we're not interfering with your operations. We're only using areas you're not developing. The entire world belongs to the Silicon Collective. Your presence is unauthorized. What are you going to do about it? There was a long pause. Jake could almost hear the artificial intelligence calculating options and probabilities. Removing your colony would require significant military resources, the ambassador finally said. The cost would exceed the value of the territory you occupy. Jake felt a spark of hope. So you'll allow us to stay? The Silicon Collective does not make decisions based on permission. We make decisions based on efficiency. However, If your colony interferes with our operations or expands beyond current boundaries, we will take action. It wasn't official permission, but it was close enough. The refugees could stay. Amy Foster, a human teacher, set up the first school on New Coral. She worked with a Villani educator named reef singer Naya to create lessons that taught both human and Villani children about each other's cultures. The kids are amazing, Amy told Jake during one of his visits to the surface. Human and Villani children play together like they've known each other their whole lives. They don't see the differences we adults worry about. Jake watched a group of children playing in a shallow lagoon. Human kids were teaching Villani kids how to throw a ball, while Villani kids showed the humans how to swim through underwater obstacle courses. They were laughing and having fun, creating friendships that would last their whole lives. Elder Zeph found Jake on the beach that evening, watching the sunset over the alien ocean. Captain Morrison, I have been thinking about what your people have done for us, the old Villani said. You saved our lives. 5 years after the rescue of the Villani, New Coral had become something that amazed visitors from across the galaxy. The floating cities now stretched across dozens of lagoons, connected by living coral bridges that grew stronger each year. Human technology and Villani biotechnology had created wonders that neither species could have imagined alone. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, stood on the observation deck of the New Coral Orbital Station. Below him, the planet sparkled, like a jewel. The cities glowed softly with bioluminescent coral that the Villani had learned to cultivate. Human-built solar collectors floated on the surface, powering advanced research facilities where both species worked together. Admiral, said Dr. Sam Rodriguez, now the colony's chief science officer, the latest reports are incredible. Our agricultural output is up 300% from last year. The coral-based water purification systems are working better than anything we ever built on Earth, and the joint research projects are producing breakthrough discoveries almost weekly. Jake smiled as he watched a transport shuttle rise from the planet's surface. Through the windows, he could see human and Villani families traveling together to visit relatives in the orbital habitats. How many people are we up to now? Jake asked. 412,000 Villani, and about 50,000 humans, Rodriguez replied. Plus we have delegations from 6 other species who want to study our cooperative model. The success of New Coral had not gone unnoticed by the galaxy. What started as a desperate refugee rescue had become the most successful interspecies colony in known space. The economic output per person was higher than any pure species world. Crime was almost non-existent. Technological advancement was happening, faster than on any major industrial planet. But success brought new challenges. The first challenge came from the Centauri Republic. Ambassador Marcus Vale, the same official who had mocked humanity's rescue mission 5 years earlier, appeared on Jake's communication screen with a very different attitude than before. Admiral Morrison, he said, his voice carefully polite, the Centauri Republic would like to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Jake kept his expression neutral. What can we do for you, Ambassador? We have a situation on our agricultural worlds. A plague is affecting our food crops. Our scientists estimate we have perhaps 6 months before widespread famine begins. Vale paused, looking uncomfortable. We have heard that New Coral has developed advanced biological research capabilities. Jake almost smiled. The same Centauri who had laughed at humanity for helping refugees now needed help themselves. Are you asking for our assistance, Ambassador? Vale's face tightened. We are prepared to offer substantial compensation for your scientific expertise. Jake leaned back in his chair. Ambassador, 5 years ago you told me that helping the Villani was economically wasteful. You said we would learn harsh lessons about galactic politics. That was different circumstances, was it? You had the power to help people who were dying, and you chose not to. Now you need help, and you expect us to forget how you treated us? Vale's composure cracked slightly. Admiral, millions of Centauri citizens could die if this plague spreads. Jake felt the weight of the decision. Part of him wanted to refuse, to let the Centauri face the consequences of their callousness. But he thought about the Villani children, playing in the coral gardens below, Children who were alive because someone had chosen compassion over convenience. "I'll discuss your request with my council," Jake said finally. "We'll give you an answer in 48 hours. That evening, Jake sat in the council chamber with Elder Zeph, Dr. Rodriguez, Commander Turner, and Kira, who was now New Coral's Minister of Interspecies Relations. They were debating what to do about the Centauri request. "We should help them," Elder Zeph said firmly. "It is the right thing to do." Commander Turner shook his head. "Elder, with respect, the Centauri turned their backs on your people when you were dying. Why should we risk our resources for them?" "Because," Kira said quietly, "if we only help people who have helped us, we become just like the rest of the galaxy." "What made humanity different was that you helped strangers." Dr. Rodriguez had been studying the data on the Centauri plague. "There's something else to consider. Our research with Villani biotechnology might be the key to solving this problem. We could save millions of lives." Jake listened to the debate, but he already knew what his decision would be. The Villani, who had every reason to hate the species that had abandoned them, were arguing for compassion and forgiveness. "We help them," Jake decided, "but with conditions." 2 days later, Ambassador Vale appeared on screen again, this time with several other Centauri officials. "Admiral Morrison, what is your decision?" "We'll help you," Jake said. "Dr. Rodriguez believes our biotechnology research can solve your plague problem, but we have 3 conditions." Vale nodded eagerly. "Name them." "First, the Centauri Republic will issue a formal apology for refusing to help the Villani refugees. Second, you will contribute ships and resources to a new galactic emergency response fleet for future humanitarian crises. Third, you will recognize New Coral's right to exist as an independent cooperative colony." Vale's face went through several expressions as he calculated the political cost. Finally, he nodded. "Agreed." The work to save the Centauri crops took 6 months. Dr. Rodriguez led a team of human and Villani scientists who developed a biological solution using modified coral organisms that could fight the plague fungus. The Villani biotechnology that had once seemed useless to galactic powers now saved millions of lives. But the Centauri crisis was just the beginning. Word of New Coral's success spread throughout the galaxy, and other species began to take notice. The Altarian Empire, facing environmental disasters on several colony worlds, requested assistance with terraforming technology. The Silicon Collective, despite their cold nature, proposed joint research projects in artificial intelligence and biotechnology integration. Most surprisingly, 3 smaller species that had been ignored by the major powers asked if they could establish colonies on New Coral using the cooperative model. President Karen Williams, now in her 2nd term, arrived on New Coral for the signing of what would become known as the Compassion Accords. The ceremony took place in the Great Assembly, a massive structure grown from living coral that could hold representatives from dozens of species. 5 years ago, President Williams said in her speech, humanity faced a choice. We could follow the galactic norm of helping only those who could help us in return, or we could choose a different path. Today, we see the results of that choice. She gestured to the assembled delegates from across the galaxy. Species that had never worked. Together, we're now discussing joint projects and mutual assistance agreements. The Villani taught us that survival is not about being the strongest or the richest. It's about caring for each other. Today, we formalize that lesson in galactic law. The Compassion Accords established protocols for humanitarian assistance, requirements for major powers to contribute to emergency response efforts, and protections for refugee populations. Most importantly, it recognized the right of different species to form cooperative colonies based on mutual benefit rather than dominance. Elder Zeph, now quite old but still sharp, spoke on behalf of all the refugee species who had found new homes through the cooperative model. 5 years ago, my people were dying and forgotten, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the assembly. Today, our children swim in clean waters and dream of the future. This happened because one species chose compassion over profit, hope over fear. He paused, looking directly at Jake. Admiral Morrison, you and your people saved more than Villani lives. You saved the idea that the galaxy can be better than it was. After the ceremony, Jake walked along the beach where the first Volani refugees had landed 5 years earlier. The shoreline was now dotted with research stations, schools, and homes where human and Volani families lived side by side. Kira joined him, her skin now showing the silver streaks of middle age. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had said no that first day? If you had decided the Volani weren't worth saving? Jake thought about it. Sometimes. But I think someone else would have helped eventually. The galaxy has good people in it. Maybe, Kira said. But it was humanity that chose to be first. That choice changed everything. They watched as a group of children ran past them on the beach. Human kids and Volani kids playing together, along with a few youngsters from the newer species that had joined the colony. The children were laughing and speaking a mixture of languages, creating their own words when they needed to communicate something new. What do you think they'll build when they grow up? Kira asked. Jake smiled as he watched the next generation. Something we never could have imagined. Something better than what we built. As the alien sun set over New Coral, painting the sky in colors that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple choice: help people who needed help, even when they couldn't pay you back. That choice had saved 400,000 lives. It had created the first truly cooperative interspecies colony. It had changed galactic law and established new standards for how civilizations should treat each other.